your 22 News Broadcast Center. This is 22 News in Focus. Today, avoiding becoming homeless. Here's Laura Hutchinson.
Good Sunday afternoon and welcome to 22 News in Focus. I'm Laura Hutchinson. The recession put many people in financial jeopardy and created a greater demand on social services. Now, as a result, homelessness is on the rise in America, and according to a new Associated Press poll, the demographic is now changing, with more single white mothers living in poverty with children than ever before. So that's where 22 News in Focus comes in. Today we'll find out if this is happening locally and also what people can do to keep yourself in good financial standing. We'll also talk about veterans struggling to make ends meet as they return home. But first, we begin today with Bill Miller, Executive Director of Friends of the Homeless, the largest emergency shelter for adults here in Western Massachusetts. Bill, thank you so much for joining us, as always.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So talk to me about what you're experiencing at the shelter. It was interesting to hear about, the changing demographic, and I wonder if that's something that you're noticing on the local level.
Well, one of the other things that's being talked about on the national level that we are seeing on the local level is the number of young people who are becoming homeless. And so, we serve about 1,200 people a year in shelter.
Wow.
And of those, about 30% are under the age of 30. So that's a group that we're really concerned about, obviously, and the 18 to 24-year-olds in particular. We want to help divert these kids from shelter so that they have a lifetime that's positive and constructive, not going from one system to another.
So from hearing, you talk to these people as they come in, what are you hearing are the contributing factors that's putting them in this situation?
I think some things are kind of unique to the Springfield area. The jobless rate is higher where we are than in some regions, and so that's certainly contributing. The other thing is when you have sort of pockets of poverty, you're going to get people who fall into homelessness more easily. If you're already living at a very low income, then you truly are one or two paychecks away from homelessness. And so that's always been a majority of the people that we see, people who fall in and out of homelessness. But over the last 2 or 3 years now, the demographic is changing in that people who've never been homeless before are coming in through our doors. And is it traced immediately to a job loss? Not exactly, because there are unemployment benefits and family and friends who can help for a time. But over time, those that kind of help sort of wears out its welcome.
Are you finding that many people, you said not only the job situation, but drugs? I mean, is drug use on the rise locally? Is that something that you're seeing as an issue as well?
It's an issue that we deal with. I don't see it as particularly on the rise. I don't know what the exact statistics are, but I think, when you've visited us, I think when you walk through our facilities, you see people who you would not expect to be homeless. They look like, sort of anybody else in a lot of cases. There are some folks that are chronically homeless and look like the kind of obvious person who you would think is homeless, but no, I think it's people just trying to get by and not being able to do that. And again, with youth, they what we're starting to talk about is it's one thing to rehabilitate somebody who's already got a job skill and they just need to get back on their feet and they know how to navigate in the world. But these younger folks, it's they don't know how to balance a checkbook. They don't know necessarily how to have a bank account, and they don't come in with job skills. So those are things that we've got to continue to really focus on.
Now, do you work with other programs in the community to try to help them build up some of those skills? How does this work if somebody does come into a homeless shelter?
Yeah. Well, we absolutely do. So we've developed a resource center that is open during the day, and part of what our vision was with that and how it is working at this point is that people from other agencies who have those skill sets can come in and teach classes, whether it's nutrition or it's job skill development and resume building and financial literacy. We have all of those classes going on, as well as the medical and healthcare and mental health care on site. So we try to bring the services to the people, but it still takes a great deal of initiative on their part to kind of work out of the situations that they're in.
Now, you said that some people are chronically homeless, you know, chronic homelessness, you called it. What about those people who maybe not fall into that category? What is like the average stay? You know, what does it, you know, when somebody goes in there, is that the end all be all, or what kind of do you see as the average, you know, length of time to get people transitioned out again?
Well, the average that we take, I mentioned it's 1,200 people, so our average is about 45 days as a length of stay. But that means that that's just an average. There are some folks who come in and, you know, sort of, you know, have a little bit of hard times, but within a week or two, they figured it out and they moved on. The people who really need to do a job search or, you know, are looking for a deeper level of resources are with us, you know, sometimes up to a year, sometimes more. If they're disabled and they're waiting for housing that's for people who are disabled, you know, the wait can be a year, can be longer.
Now, we usually talk to you in the winter in particular, just because, you know, it's cold out and, you know, it's just terrible to see people out in the cold, you know.
Right.
But one thing that you always say is that we have people all year round. Is summer equally as busy for you as the winter as well? I mean, is this, you know, do you still have a major population there?
We're very full. And, you know, we get new people every day. So right now, today, yesterday, the day before. This past January, I have to say, in February and March were the busiest that I had ever seen. So, you know, we had opened up our dining room and we just had, you know, an unbelievable amount of people. But our staff is working very hard to house people as quickly as possible or divert people. So that is, you know, we'll kind of counsel people if they call asking for shelter and go through the list with them. You know, what other resources do you have? What other family can you turn to? If a bus ticket keeps somebody from becoming homeless, you know, then we'll come up with funding for that. You know, if they have any other choice, any other alternative, they should use that alternative. But we are very full.
What was bringing people in at that time? You said January, February, March. Was there a local event that made, you know, that created this, or?
Well, you know, there was the gas explosion that impacted some of the housing in that area, including an apartment building that we owned, and that had an impact. But and that was the day after Thanksgiving. But even leading up to that, our numbers were rising, and then they continued to rise after the explosion. And so, to be honest, even though I've been in this business for an awful lot of years, you never quite know exactly what's going on. So, but again, this summer we're really over capacity, and we're working with a ton of people, and our meal service is very busy. And you know, the one good difference between the summer and the winter is it's not necessarily life-threatening if somebody is staying outdoors.
Right. Are people coming in from out of town, out of state?
There's a percentage of people that do that, but and that's held steady for as long as we've kept records. But it's not a particular influx that we can see. So, and I don't think that was the case in the winter, because we are the largest place in Western Mass. There's only a handful of others, and they're very small. We do serve the region, and so we do get people from, I mean, I think we had people from 60 different cities and towns within Massachusetts last year. So, you know, that's part of the issue.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what is, you know, what is next? So as people recognize that homelessness is an issue here in Western Mass, you know, how can people help out the most? And how do their donations sort of work into the program as well? Because, you know, there's an effort to help people get into shelters or get into places, you know, a little bit more stable, low-income housing or something, you know. So how do their donations go toward that?
Well, the donations do allow for more flexibility in terms of how we manage, you know, any particular case. So, you know, there was a young man who needed a school uniform. He was 18, he was still finishing high school, and, you know, we were able to purchase uniforms for him. I mean, you know, if we had to buy clothes for everybody that came in, though, we couldn't possibly do that. But sometimes it's the little things, sometimes it's the bigger things. You know, our meals cost, there's a really substantial cost to providing meals. I think we provided 150,000 meals last year. So you can imagine it's just a kind of a high volume. You're sort of trying to run a restaurant where nobody pays.
Right,
you know?
exactly.
Not that they wouldn't, and not that they don't volunteer and that kind of thing, but there is a cost to it. So, you know, we do have a website. People can take a look at that. They can like us on Facebook. We try to just communicate with the public, and we love it when they communicate with us, whether it's through donations or volunteering or other means of support.
Okay, Bill Miller, Friends of the Homeless, thank you so much for coming on, joining us, and talking to us about what's going on there, and of course how the community can help. That's a big one.
Well,
thank you so much. I appreciate it. And after the break, we're going to discuss ways for people to improve their credit and finances in this tough economy. So stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. Today we're talking about how to avoid homelessness, a growing problem not only here in Western Massachusetts but also nationwide. Joining me now we have Steve Plummer, a credit counselor, and we have Paul Bailey, Executive Director of Springfield Partners for Community Action. I want to thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
And we're seeing that the numbers are going up, demographic changing. Bill Miller was just talking about how he's seeing younger people entering the homeless shelters as well, which is really scary and unfortunate because, you know, nobody should be in a homeless shelter, but even when you're very young. So I want to talk about, you know, what people can do to prevent this from happening to them. Why don't you start off by talking to us about what Springfield Partners for Community Action is so that people understand where you're coming from?
Well, Springfield Partners for Community Action is just what it's called, a community action agency. We have programs that help people that are facing the maze of poverty, and we have programs to help people, you know, lift them hopefully out of poverty.
Now, do they seek you out, or do you work with like the homeless shelters, or how does this
A number of
work?
ways. As you speak about the homeless shelters, well, they house the homeless. We have programs to hopefully get people out of those shelters. And Stephen works with the local homeless shelters to provide credit counseling and financial literacy programming.
So, Steve, what are you seeing? Any mistakes that people are making right now? You know what I mean? What can people do to ensure that they stay on the right path? Talk to us about this. You know, what is something that you're noticing that is happening now?
One of the most important things is people need to protect their credit scores. A lot of times we tend to lose sight of that and think, well, our credit score is not that important, but it really is important. And one of the things I'm always telling people to do is, even though you may not want to do it, you have to take a look at your credit report and see what's there, and then figure out what you're doing right and what you're not doing right, and then try to address those.
So what are those things that will negatively impact your credit score? Many people don't realize, you know, how many credit cards should I have? What, you know, when's a good time to run that credit score? What companies should I allow to do that? So talk to us about what can negatively impact your score.
The one thing you want to do is that there's only one reliable website where you can get your credit reports, and that's annualcreditreport.com. It's sponsored by the government. And that's the only place you can reliably get your credit report without being asked for a credit card, which is what you don't want. But one of the things people don't realize about their credit score is if you have some credit cards, which we all do, we don't really pay attention to what our balances are. What we pay attention to is that minimum payment. But what you want to pay attention to is what percentage of your credit limit are you using. And what you want to do is keep that percentage below 30%. 10% is even better. Probably no one in this room does that, but that's what the ideal is shoot for 30% at worst, but 10% of used credit is ideal. What you don't want to do is get it over 30%, and certainly you don't want to max out a credit card. That will literally destroy your credit score.
Yeah, so it's amazing because you see this available credit, but you shouldn't look at it as available credit because you really don't want to use that.
Exactly.
No, you don't. You really don't want it. And absolutely you don't want your used credit to ever go over 30%.
Right. Now, what, obviously you need a credit score to buy a house, but talk to me about why it is so important to, what is a good credit score and why this is so important to have a good one?
What most lenders are looking for is a credit score somewhere between 620 on the low, very low side,
Okay.
and maybe as high as 750, 760 on the upper end. Now, higher than that is going to benefit you more because you'll get a better interest rate and better terms, but below 620, the odds of getting a home loan are pretty negligible.
So what can people do? Let's say, they've hit rock bottom, they're resorting to going to a homeless shelter, maybe they're filing for bankruptcy. What can people do? Where do you start? How do you begin to get out of this hole?
A lot of the people that we see at our agency have some blemishes on their credit. And blemishes mean a foreclosure, a short sale, a bankruptcy, creditors suing them and taking judgments. Some of those things can be overcome, but unfortunately, only the passage of time is going to make some of those things go away. You can overcome all of those, but it's going to take some time before your bank is going to favorably consider you for a loan if you have those blemishes on your credit. And a lot of our clients have those blemishes. So those are some of the things that you want to avoid if you possibly can. But if you are unfortunate enough to have them on your record, sometimes only the passage of time will put you back in a position where you can now get a home loan.
And what about filing for bankruptcy? Who does that work for? Do you ever recommend that to somebody? Obviously, it feels like a worst case scenario, but who would that be appropriate for?
To be really honest, and a lot of lawyers out there might disagree, I recommend bankruptcy as an absolute last resort. It should not be a credit management type device. And here's what I always tell people who are considering bankruptcy is they shouldn't even consider it until they have figured out how they got here in the first place. In other words, is it misuse of credit? Was it loss of a job? Was it an illness? Was it some kind of catastrophe? That's a legitimate reason to file bankruptcy. But if it's only misuse of credit cards, you're really going to have to stare that down and figure out how and why you got there in the first place.
Right.
Otherwise, statistically, the odds of you filing bankruptcy again are overwhelming unless you figure out first how I got here.
And how long does it take to come out of that hole? I understand it would be different case by case, but on an estimate level, how long does it take for someone to really improve their financial situation?
Are you talking about somebody who is trying to buy a house or
somebody
has some
who may
blemishes?
be facing homelessness and would like to get back on their feet? How long does it take? Of course, it depends on the person, how hard they're willing to work. But what's that window that you've experienced? You've seen someone get out as early as, or you know what I mean?
I usually tell people it's going to take a good 6 months
Okay.
to get your credit fixed, and sometimes as long as a year. Now, if your objective is buying a house, it's going to be a year of pretty hard work.
Okay.
But if we're
No, go ahead.
no, you're right. If we're talking about someone who's facing homelessness or is in homelessness, it's going to take a little bit longer than that to get out of it, because there are probably some other issues or other things that are going on in their life that are going to have to be corrected as well. To a lot of programming, a lot of hand holding, a lot of case management to get to the point of living in a stable situation. So it would take a little bit longer than 6 months.
Yeah. Now, Paul, I understand that Partners for Community Action does offer different areas of interest. It's not just financial.
Right.
There are some housing opportunities and all that. Talk to me about some of the other areas that you offer.
We help with housing search. We help with folks that are in homes, and whether they own the home or rent. We weatherize homes so that they can save on their utility bills. We help people with their taxes, volunteer income tax assistance, so people don't pay the huge payments to get their taxes completed. We also have a low-income tax clinic that helps people to have tax controversies so that they don't end up. Most people, for whatever reason, they receive a notice from the IRS and it immediately goes into the wastebasket for whatever reason. The IRS, because it works through computers and things like that, a year, 2 years down the road, they'll get in touch with you again. But by that time, that $100 that you owe now is multiplied to
Right.
a couple $100,000.
Sure, of course.
And so we have to help people in those situations. Stephen has financial literacy, credit counseling. We have a foreclosure clinic. We help people with that are facing foreclosure, help them out of that situation.
And how much does it cost for someone to be able to participate in your services?
Absolutely
so this
nothing.
Is free to
This
consumer.
is programs that are paid for in some instances by the federal government, because we do receive money and funds from the federal government as well as from the state and other dollars from other contributions.
Now, do people have to apply to get in and start utilizing this, or how does
They have a situation, they come in, ask for help, and they receive that help.
Okay, well, that sounds very
Yeah.
easy. Best way for them to contact you: walking in, online. What are some?
By phone. We have our phone line. Walk-ins are welcome. We certainly will take folks right away, and we'll try to help them as best we can. And
Okay, very good. Paul Bailey, I want to thank you, and Steve Plummer, thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
here. It
Thank
really
you.
is a pleasure to have you on and answer some of these financial questions. Everybody wants to know how we can be smart with our money. I appreciate you coming on and talking to us about it. And when somebody is financially stable, what programs are available to help find affordable housing? We're going to discuss that after the break, so stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. We are talking about avoiding homelessness and what you can do if you are on the brink of becoming homeless. For 40 years, HAP Housing has worked to provide housing assistance through many local, state, and federal programs. And joining me to talk all about this, we have Lauren Voyer, Associate Executive Director of Housing Support Services at HAP Housing. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. Now, this all sort of comes full circle. It seems like these community programs really all can kind of almost touch on similar things. You were saying HAP Housing can even help you access some of your financial credit scores, kind of help people understand where they're at and where they need to be. So talk to me about what you can provide when people walk through your doors.
Sure, absolutely. Well, there's a variety of programs at HAP that assist families who are facing homelessness. And they've sort of what we call the front door of HAP is our Housing Consumer Education Center. And we do have walk-in hours there Monday through Friday in the morning. We were able to help folks to take a look at any aspect of things that might be impacting putting their housing at risk. So also with the shelter programs that we operate, when the participants come into the program, they are assisted with accessing their credit scores. They are assisted with a very intensive intake and assessment process, which helps us to determine with them, do they need a variety of services, starting with getting GED in order to be able to re-enter the workforce or enter it for the first time. As Bill said, we see a lot of young moms. We see, many mothers who haven't been able to make it on their own and are for the first time in an apartment and are unable to really sustain that. So they come to us, we work with them, help them to get their GED, help them to get English as a second language courses. Oftentimes that's an important piece. And then we have workforce development programs that we enroll folks in with our partners around the region. And HAP and the partners in the region have been really recognized for being highly effective and really having a collaboration that's unique in the state. So we're very proud of that. And most recently we've worked with Valley Opportunity Council, FutureWorks, CareerPoint, and Springfield Partners, and we've developed a variety of new initiatives to assist people to get back into the workforce. So that's very exciting, and it's a more intensive effort than we've seen in several years.
Yeah, and it appears to be working as well. I understand you're working with the state as well to get people out of hotels, the homeless community that's living in hotels, and that's been very successful. I think he was saying that they were somewhere around 30% had been, and that's very good.
Right, that's correct. About 35% of the families that were. We had a high of over 500 families that were in hotels in Western Mass, and so we've reduced that by 30%. We've closed 2 hotels. That was, a very big project with the assistance of the Department of Housing and Community Development. We received mass rental vouchers for many of those folks who had disabilities, and we were able to get them out of the motels and back into the community.
That's quite a feat. It really is. You know, at one point that we were looking at so many, you know, hundreds and hundreds, and it really we really have gotten that number down a lot. Why is it that the demographic is shifting to women, do you think? What are you hearing from people? You know, why are women and children being put in this situation more than ever before?
Well, I think if you think of initially of how many single female heads of households there are just by virtue of divorce, and then there's a very high incidence of domestic violence in women who end up in homeless shelters. So they may be fleeing that dangerous situation, and that usually means they take what they can take with them and try to exit in a safe manner, which may mean they don't have a lot of resources to take with them. Often the domestic violence can include being prohibited from really participating in the finances in the family. So that creates a situation where it's very difficult to leave and get back on your feet without some assistance. So we do also have a transitional living program for women fleeing domestic violence.
Really?
And that's a 2-year program where they can come and live in an apartment unit that is the leases for them, and they live in the apartment and get very intensive case management services. We work very closely with some of the other domestic violence providers and help them to work through those issues, as well as to, again, get back into the workforce, get their GED, whatever other kinds of barriers they're facing that are keeping them from being self-sufficient.
Now I have to ask, what does your waiting list look like for some of these programs? Do you have any kind of waiting list?
Well, it depends on the program.
Okay.
The shelter programs, that's a closed referral process through DHCD, and families have to go to the local DTA offices, the Department of Transitional Assistance offices, which are two are in Springfield and one in Holyoke, you know, in the local area.
Sure.
So that process is handled. They come to us once they've been found eligible for emergency assistance. But then with the transitional living programs, yes, we do always have more of a need than we have the availability. We have a program in Holyoke for young mothers, usually in the 18 to 24-year-old range, and that program has a high demand. We see that in the area, teen programs for young adults, as Bill has mentioned, are you know, there's a need for more than what is actually available.
So how can people begin to turn their lives around when they walk through the door? I mean, where do you begin? How long does it take? You know,
Right.
what can people expect when they walk through your doors? What questions are they going to be asked?
Sure. Well, you know, there's a range of situations that families come to us with. They may have experienced a fire, or they may have had a condemnation of their building, and they just need some temporary short-term assistance for us to get a security deposit and perhaps the first month's rent to reestablish their household. In other cases, when people come into shelter, they may not have any of those things in place that we discussed previously and may need that full range of service. That could mean might take up to a year for them to really be in a place where they could afford, with the assistance we can give them, you know, to set up an apartment to sustain that over time. And then in our Section 8 program, we have a wonderful program that's the Family Self-Sufficiency Program, where the people that participate in that are able to accrue some funds over time, and over a 5-year period, the goal is for them to become self-sufficient and off of all state benefits. And then, you know, they can oftentimes put down a down payment on a house or start a business. So there's really a range of lengths of time depending on people's needs that we are able to assist them.
And how about the first-time homebuyer program? How successful has that been? I know that that's been operational for maybe the last couple of weeks. I believe it was sometime in July, maybe
A
early
new session
July.
started.
Yeah.
Yes, I believe you're right about that. And that's been a very successful and very popular program where people can learn some of the things that Steve was talking about in terms
Sure.
of repairing your credit and preparing to become a home buyer. And
Sure.
it can start at the very early stages.
Yeah.
It certainly isn't a situation where people need to wait until, oh, I've found a house and I want to go get a
Sure.
mortgage.
Yeah.
There's a lot to learn and a lot to know. So it's very good to be proactive about that.
Yes, and this program through HAP Housing that helps people out financially, somewhere around $15,000 if you are interested in purchasing in one of the tornado hit communities. That's something that's been going on for some time too.
Yes, and that's something that I don't know a great deal about, but certainly people can learn about that at our website at haphousing.org.
Yeah,
and there's also a lot of information about avoiding homelessness on that website as well.
Yeah. So what do you recommend to people who, who are either on the brink of homelessness or, from what we've been talking about, people who may be sort of at the end, and as we were talking about in the previous segment, wondering if bankruptcy is for them or all of that, you know what I mean? What would you recommend to somebody before they go ahead with that?
Sure. Well, the way that they can come in and find out some information and get referral is through our Housing Consumer Education Center. And they can come to HAP and talk with someone there and help to get some direction around that. There's also at mass.gov, there's good information about all the programs that the state offers, and also massresources.org has quite a bit of information about resources that folks can access to assist them to get started and figure out where they should go, depending upon their circumstance.
Okay. And how has your demand changed just out of, after the tornado and all that? Did that greatly increase the demand in your programs?
It did increase demand. It also decreased the availability of affordable units in the area. Unfortunately, the area that was hit, there was a significant number of affordable housing units in that area. So it took some units off the market at a time when we were helping to exit folks from the motels. So, the supply is sometimes not as good as you'd like it to be, but HAP's reputation certainly helps with landlords. They hear there'll be case management and there'll be HAP housing staff that will be paying attention to what's going on that you can contact if you need to, and that really makes a difference. They really seem to respond well to having that kind of assistance.
Seems like there really is something for everyone, regardless of what your situation is, whatever it is, there's something for you if you walk in there. It sounds like you can certainly get help. Lauren Voyer, I want to thank you so much for joining us from HAP Housing. Talk to us about the programs and what's available and how people can access that. So I do appreciate you joining us and talking to us about that. And when we return, we are going to discuss one organization and what they're doing to help homeless veterans. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. Today we've been discussing the state of homelessness here in Western Massachusetts and how you can reduce your chances of becoming homeless. One group that has seen its share of homeless are veterans. According to the state, there are over 1,000 homeless veterans, both men and women, across just this state alone. That's nearly 19% of all homeless adults. One organization that is working to reduce that number and other issues facing veterans is Soldier On. And joining us now to talk all about that, we have Jack Downing, President and CEO of Soldier On, and we have Don Chavan, who's a veteran who was also formerly homeless, and he's here to talk to us about his road to recovery. Really, I want to thank you both so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
It's very valuable just to not only know what's available, but to hear firsthand how somebody really came out of that, Jack, I first want to ask you, do you agree with what you're hearing, first of all? I mean, I know that when you hear of homeless population, it's a little different when we talk veterans, but what are you experiencing?
What we're experiencing is very significant right now. There's a drawdown going on in our military right now. As a result of that drawdown in the last 14 months, the average age of a homeless veteran in our care has dropped from 54 and a half years old down to 50 years old. Wow. And it continues to spiral down. We've gone from essentially a population of men and women who were Vietnam, post-Vietnam veterans, and we now have about 41 veterans who have served in this current conflict in our care. So that's number rising. Every night we have 265 beds filled at 100% capacity for the last 10 years, and we're really over capacity. We house an additional 15 to 18 people every night in cots waiting for beds to open up in our major facilities. So veteran homelessness continues to rise, and it's going to continue to rise because the drawdown is going to continue. And until that stabilizes, I think this is a situation we all face.
Wow, it really is sad to hear about that, especially when there are so many people who are fighting for our country. Don, a veteran yourself, can you talk to us about tell us your story? I mean, what happened to you?
After coming out of the war, you know, the reception for Vietnam veterans wasn't good at all. So I ended up with being drug addicted and being homeless. And what happened was, fortunately for me, there was an organization at the time called United Veterans of America had an outreach, a recruiter who would come around and go to shelters and ask who were veterans and then they want to come and be a part of the program. And fortunately, at first, when I heard this, and I was in Connecticut, and everything sounded good about the program, then I said, well, where is this program? He said, well, it's in Massachusetts. I said, well, no, I'm not going there. You know, so I kind of just turned away. But I kind of thought about it, and I said to myself, you know, I'm in a bad position, and I can't get any worse, and the only way I can go right now is up. So I decided to kind of take that leap and come to Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. And fortunately, I got with an organization, which is now called Soldier On, that has done some amazing things. And I was fortunate enough to be a part of that. And I guess after the first 2 weeks, I began to get some clarity. There were so many things they had to offer. And I said, you know, it was time for me to try to take advantage of that. So I'm very fortunate to be one of those people that took advantage of what Soldier On had to offer. You know,
Bill Miller was talking about people who have chronic homelessness, you know, people who are homeless and are basically going to stay that way. How did you sort of change that mentality? You said you battled with drugs as well.
Yeah.
I don't know how long you were homeless, but how did you finally change that? Where did you get the drive to? Because I know that it's hard to do that.
I think the major thing was just to have people who will reach out to you, you know. And there were, at the time, I didn't know any organizations that were able to do that. I mean, there was times that the VA tried to have programs to set up for veterans where they would be able to take advantage of, you know, recovery. But I think the difference with Soldier On was that they had such a unique staff, a wonderful program, and I think that they showed that they really cared, because, I mean, we could tell right away if this is just a job or is this your passion. Mm-hmm. And I was able to distinguish between both, and I found out that this was their passion at Soldier On.
So how long were you homeless?
I was homeless for about, I would say, maybe 3 or 4 years.
So what do you think now, looking back, now that you know all that you've been able to accomplish, how far you've been able to come, what would you say to those people who are chronic homelessness, you know, chronically homeless?
You know, it's just, for veterans especially, because there's such a disconnect between the community and veterans, and the community have no idea what veterans go through. If you can ever find an organization that is, and I know this right now, I don't feel there's any as unique as Soldier On. If you can find an organization that have the personnel and the passion to reach out to you and, you know, help you get your life together, I would say don't give up. Mm-hmm. You know, because it was a roller coaster ride for me, so it didn't happen in the first instance. It took a while.
And how are you now?
Oh, well, I'm doing things that I didn't think I would be able to do. So I'm doing things at Soldier On, also with the VA. I'm payee rep for Soldier On. You know, I volunteer to do that to help guys handle money. I try to sit on a couple of boards to help improve some of the situations that veterans go through, not only at the VA, but some things at Soldier On also.
So you've made it your passion.
I made it my passion. Yeah. I kind of got bitten. You know, now I have the bug. Yeah.
Got the bug. Jack, how does this, you know, Soldier On handle this? You know, when you have somebody who may be resistant, or, you know what I mean, who may not even want to jump state lines and get on 91 North. You know, yeah. How do you do that?
Well, I think you heard what Don said. You have to have people with passion. So at Soldier On, we had to change how we deliver services and how we relate to the people in need. So the first thing that happens when you come in to Soldier On is you're told that your brokenness, your weakness is a gift to us. Because if Don doesn't come in with his addiction, if he doesn't come in and say, I need help, I don't have a job. So we need to be grateful for the people we serve. The second thing that we decided was that we were very aware that everyone that put on the American military uniform, all 25 million Americans that were veterans, said to each of us, I will die for you, and we never clearly heard that. Once you hear that clearly, internally, it does not make sense that the people who made that commitment to die for us so we could have these freedoms and opportunities for our lives and for our children and our families, it was acceptable for them to live in shelters, acceptable for them to get used clothing, and acceptable for them to ricochet from place to place for services. So we decided that we would stop branding homeless veterans failures, and we would be responsible for their failure. So when you come into Soldier On, the difference between our staff and other staffs is simply this. If you fail tonight, if you go back to your self-defeating behaviors, our conversation with you in the morning is, hey, Don, you went back to using drugs last night. What aren't we doing to build a relationship of trust with you so that you don't have to go back to that and you can come to us and say, hey, I need some help. Once you have that dignity that you're not going to fail, once you're secure, that no matter what you do, you're not going to be thrown out, okay? You're able then to start to trust people. So at Soldier On, we don't have any rules that you can't break. We don't have any rule that's more important than your need. So when you start to do that, people feel empowered to be themselves. They no longer have to try to do something. They can just be themselves. Once that is there, okay, what happens is just what happened to Don. You get the flu. You're exposed to this virus that you've never experienced before, and you wake up one day and you got it. You're sober, you feel better, and you start to say, hey, what can I do to help other people? Because 84% of the people in our care have had an addiction problem. 88% have had some form of mental health disorder. Those two issues drive you to focus on your need 24 hours a day. So what we need to do is teach you how to focus out and not in, because it's the inward focus that always drives you back to your addiction. Your selfishness, your need. So we then work very hard at getting you to help other people in our community get the things done that they need done. So Don would help elderly vets maybe get dressed in the morning. He might get up in the morning and help a guy get over to the dining room to get to his food. He may be able to help a guy by driving him somewhere. As you start to perform what seemed to us to be very ordinary and not significant tasks, for Don became the experience of, oh my God, I can care about other people.
You know what, I do want to, I want to hear more about what you did and what others are doing as well, but we are going to take a short break. So I'll stop you there and stay with us. We are going to continue this conversation. We're watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. If you are just joining us, we've been discussing homelessness here in Western Massachusetts. We were just hearing some wonderful stories from Jack Downing and Don Chavan. Don is a veteran, formerly homeless, now on the road to recovery and doing quite remarkable from what you were telling us, what you've been able to accomplish. And Jack just telling us about what other people are able to do after going through the program. It really sounds like you reach an almost hopeless point, but then pull them out and get them to move on. Talk to me about what other examples of, like, you know, Don is here speaking to us and telling his message out to the world. What are some other veterans doing? You know, what are the possibilities?
The possibilities are unlimited. Soldier On is a very large organization. We're now present in 7 states. We employ 108 people. 72 of the people we employ are formerly homeless veterans like Don, who we've educated and trained so they can do jobs and receive professional wages. But I think the most important thing we do is accept every veteran the way they are. If you're going to do this work, you need to love people the way they are. You need to love them addicted. You need to love them angry. You need to love them broken. Once you start doing that and accepting them that way, people get to a comfort level where they feel they can move their lives. So an individual like Don now lives with a horizon, okay, that continuously moves up each day. It's no longer kind of a dead-end life. His life has a purpose. He doesn't just take care of veterans' money and help them, the men and women that are less able, control their finances responsibly. He runs a business. We have vending machines in all our buildings. He operates all of those. He does the inventory. He controls stocking them. He makes sure the money is distributed where it's got to go. So there's a number of things that happen to people when they recover, and our problem is we normally don't give people time to do that. One of the earlier segments, you asked people, how long does it take people to get out of this? I don't think you ever get out. I think you are who you are. And what I think we really do, what we've learned is that people have different levels of need to change. And so each person that comes into us, we run a program for them. We don't make you fit into Soldier On. Soldier On needs to serve you and meet your need. So I think that's what makes us more unique than other programs. So our thing would be the average veteran who comes into our door today is with us at least 14 months. And we think that really, and what we say to the veterans, most of the veterans that come into us are in need of services for the rest of their life. So we're committed to you for the rest of your life. And our job is to follow you with services wherever you go, because it's the services being delivered to you that help you stabilize. Once you're stable, you'll make good choices. So for Don, stability meant a beautiful place to live that he felt was his home, where we could deliver services that he needs to stay stable, which allows him to go out in the community and do that for others, and not just for veterans, but for other populations of people.
Don, how does that make you feel to be able to go out and help others when you know that you were in their position at one point?
It's really a reward that I wouldn't get from any psychologist or psychiatrist. You know, when you go out and you help others, it's a kind of wellness plan for me, you know, and I just dive into it, you know, and it's one of the things that I look forward to doing every single day, you know, volunteering, helping, you know, seeing that you're making a difference, you know, and whether it's a small or big one, I mean, it's very rewarding.
Jack and Don, I want to thank you both so much for being here, for sharing your story, to feel comfortable to tell us about your experiences, and hopefully that will help others in a similar situation. And Jack, you're doing great things at Soldier On. Thank you so much for joining us to talk to us about it. Really appreciate it.
All right, thanks for having me.
And we're going to have the last word for you after the break. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. You've been watching 22 News in Focus. Today we talked all about homeless here in Western Massachusetts, how the demographic is changing and what people can do to keep your own finances in order. We also talked about veterans and the challenges they face as they return home. That is our program for today. If you've missed any of it, you can watch it in full on our website at WWLP.com. We want to thank you at home for watching, and we of course want to thank our guests for joining us today. From all of us here at 22 News, we wish you a wonderful Sunday. Take care.